Have you come to the realization that you need to terminate an employee's employment? If you're a good leader with a good heart, you will never ever enjoy the experience of having to fire someone. However, if you are a good leader, you will know that when you realize that someone no longer should be on the team and that they're actually hindering the progress of the team, you will do it strategically and as quickly as possible. Hi, I'm Barika from Simply Unique Coaching. I have been leading since 1997. I like to say I'm the leader who learned in the trenches. And yes, I have had to fire employees. I have had to terminate employment, either for employees, agency, people who were being work was being outsourced to. And it just, for a matter of fact, was just that certain things did not work out. So here's some of the things you want to take into consideration before you fire someone. And you want to make sure you're not making an emotional decision. You shouldn't feel like happy on the inside that this person is being terminated. If so, you don't have the right heart for leadership. I'm just gonna tell you. Either you don't have the right heart towards that person or you don't have the right heart towards leadership, or it could be a combination of both. But I can tell you there have been people I have not gotten along with, and I still have been able to work with them. Okay. Just because I don't get along with them, just because we see from two different perspectives doesn't mean that they're a bad person. They may challenge my thinking. They may challenge the way that I'm considering doing things. And that's okay because that is how we build innovation. However, if you find that you can't wait to stick it to this person, that's the wrong attitude. I'm just going to tell you up front. Next, not having the proper documentation. You need to document. Don't just go off flippantly and say, something very generalized. You need to be specific. What is the date, the time that the issue happened? You need to document, because it shouldn't be just like something that happened and you just kind of brushed it off, and then it gets to the point where it builds up and you're like, okay, you're fine. It's like, but what proof do you have? What proof do you have that this person kept coming in late? What proof do you have that this person talked inappropriately to a customer? Maybe they cursed the customer out, or like, what do you have documented to show the case that you're making? And I have other videos on that to talk about how to document those kind of things, but you should have some documentation to support your stance, and you should not be fluffing documentation. You should not be making it up at the last minute or anything like that. So you should be documenting as things go along, especially when you know that, okay, this is an issue that if it continues, this is going to be a big problem. So I need to start documenting now, because if I have to terminate this person because they're not making the right choices that are in line with the organization, then I need to be able to show why I had to terminate their employment. Also, whenever you're going to terminate someone, you need to really let them know the specific as to why they're being terminated. Make sure that they walk away with a clear understanding of it, and make sure you're able to state your case. This is why the documentation is important, because I remember there was an agency that I was working with, and the person that they assigned to us just wasn't getting things done. And I let them know we would no longer need their service. And then so they asked me for detail, and I was able to say, boop, 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 boop. Here are like 5 different occasions where this person either turned this stuff late or didn't turn it at all or didn't respond, or just, was being very lackadaisical with our assignments. So I was able to support it. They didn't even refute it. When they saw the documentation, they said, okay. And they handled it on their side because the person actually worked for them. And I would say this is not legal or investment advice. None of my videos are legal or investment advice. They are basically for educational purposes. So let me just give that caveat. But also that documentation can help support you if legal proceedings need to occur. Okay. So you need to be mindful of that. And again, if you have a good heart as a leader, you're never looking for a gotcha, but you do need to protect the company, and you also need to protect the team as well. And so it kind of goes both ways. If the employee, if you're a good leader and you're doing the right things, if you have an employee that's not doing the right things, you do need to document that and help to support that. Also, not having empathy as you're going through the process. And that's why I said you should never really be happy about having to terminate somebody's employment. And because at the end of the day, the person has to pay rent, the person has to get gas, food, and all of those things. And they may have a family, they may have other things, school fees and stuff like that. So it should never be a delight to terminate someone's employment. It should always be a man, let me see what I can do to help you and support you, especially if they were a good employee, because good employees can sometimes just have bad seasons of life. Maybe they go through a deep depression and they just seem to not be able to pull themselves out of it. Depending on the circumstance and the situation, you may have to actually terminate their employment. But it could be a situation where it's like, hey, you have been an amazing employee in the past, but over the last 6 months, you just have not been meeting your performance metrics. And I would love to be able to keep you on, but I can only keep on employees who are meeting the metrics. So here's what I'm going to do. We are going to let you go. But if you can, if at some point in time in the future, you're able to get to the point where you're performing the way you were performing in the past, definitely feel free to give me a call. We may be able to work something out where we can bring you back on a trial basis, and depending on how you're performing, then you can look at having you come back, or you can even say, like, I can write you a letter of recommendation when or I can recommend you. It just depends on the situation, because if it's a bad employee with a bad heart, then those people just I kind of just let them go. But if it's a good employee with a good heart that just came into life circumstances, I definitely try to work with them and try to be as supportive of them as possible. This is the big thing. And make sure you secure the company assets. Don't fire them and then have to say, hey, I need, all this stuff back. Like, you lock down whatever you need to lock down, whether it's websites, whether it's permissions to documents, stuff like that. Make sure they can't go in and sabotage the things that they've had access to during that time. Also, you need to take into consideration what impact is this termination going to have on other employees that are in the organization. Were they close to this person? Were they working with them for a long time? And if it was a bad employee doing, not so great things, the good employees are going to be happy about that, because they're going to be like, thank you. Thank you for addressing what we've been seeing day in and day out. If it was a good employee that came upon bad times, that can definitely affect the team. And, you can have a heart to heart conversation with them to the extent that you're allowed to. Don't go into inappropriate stuff, but you can address to the extent that you can. But you also have to keep privacy in the forefront of your mind, and to make sure that you keep confidential matters confidential. So I was on social media the other day and I read something really interesting where there was a discussion about how to terminate employees. Some people think it's better to do it in person or face to face, whether it's via Zoom or whether it's, in person if you're working together on a physical location. If it's Zoom, then, doing it that way if you're doing it more remotely, or maybe to call the person over the phone and give them the information so that they have time to process it and they can express their feelings without necessarily being the same space and place and location as the leader who's having to share that information with them. So let me know your thoughts on that. I would definitely say if your organization has an HR department, your HR department should be involved. Again, I mentioned all of that in a different video. And if you want to know 10 signs that you may need to terminate an employee, if you're like, I'm not quite sure, I want you to watch this video next. And with that being said, make it a great day.